The sun was sinking low over the Arizona frontier when the town of Red Hollow began to empty, dust hanging thick in the air, like a warning that trouble never truly slept in places like this. And that was when Nia walked into the trading post, her moccasins silent on the wooden floor, her long black hair braided tight as if she had learned early that anything loose in this world could be grabbed and torn away. She carried a tin bucket in her hands, not as a weapon but as a necessity, eyes lowered not in weakness but in survival, because Apache blood in a white man's town was a dangerous thing to carry openly, and the men noticed her immediately, 3 of them leaning near the counter with the smell of whiskey and sweat, clinging to them, their laughter dying the moment they saw her, the way wolves stop howling when prey steps into view, and she felt it before she heard it. The shift in the room, the air tightening, the silent sharpening, and when she turned, their eyes were already on her, stripping her of safety, of dignity, of escape. One of them stepped forward, tall and broad with a scar cutting across his cheek, blocking her path as if he owned the floor beneath her feet. Another moved to her side, the third behind her, and in that instant she understood she was cornered, just like her mother once had been, just like so many before her. And the trader behind the counter looked away because in Red Hollow, looking away was how men stayed alive, and the scarred man spoke low, mocking, asking what an Apache girl was doing alone, asking where her tribe was, asking questions that were not meant to be answered. And when she tried to step back, the man behind her laughed, the sound cruel and careless, and her heart pounded, but her face remained still because fear only fed men like these. They circled closer, one reaching out, fingers brushing the fringe of her dress, and something ancient stirred in her chest, the memory of stories told around fires, of warriors and honor and land stolen at gunpoint. But she was alone here, no brothers, no uncles, no protection, just a bucket and a promise to herself that she would survive another day. And that was when the door creaked open behind them, slow and deliberate, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife, boots heavy on the wood, confident, unhurried. And the men turned, annoyed at first, until they saw who it was and the room seemed to breathe again. Elias Crow stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, dust-coated from a long ride, had pulled low over eyes that had seen too much of this land to be impressed by bullies, a rancher known not for loud words but for the quiet way men moved aside when he entered, his presence alone shifting the balance of power. And he took in the scene in a single glance, the 3 men, the girl, the fear humming just beneath the surface, and he stepped forward, stopping just short of them, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a rifle cocked somewhere out of sight. And he said simply, "Step away from her." And the scarred man sneered, trying to laugh it off, asking since when Elias Crow started caring about Apache girls. And Elias's jaw tightened, his hand resting near his gun but not touching it, because he didn't need to draw yet, not with the whole room watching. And he met the man's eyes and said the words that would echo through Red Hollow for years to come. "She's with me," and the room froze, the meaning settling in slow and heavy, because in the West those words were not a suggestion, they were a claim, a promise, and sometimes a death sentence for anyone foolish enough to challenge it. And the men hesitated, weighing their pride against their lives. And for the first time since she had walked in, Nia lifted her eyes, meeting Elias's gaze, searching for mockery, for cruelty, for danger, but finding something else instead. Something steady, something rare. And as the scarred man finally spat on the floor and stepped back, muttering curses, the balance shifted. The trap broke open, and the Apache girl walked out of the trading post beside the rancher, unaware that this moment would bind their fates together in ways neither of them yet understood. And as the dust swallowed them outside, the story truly began. A story of loyalty, land, blood, and the kind of courage that doesn't shout but stands firm when it matters most. And if this opening has pulled you in, if you can feel the heat of the sun and the danger in the air, then you already know this is the kind of story you don't want to miss, so stay with us. Because the next chapter will test everything these characters believe in, and subscribing now means you won't miss a single moment of what comes next. The ride back to Elias Crow's ranch was quiet, the kind of silence filled with unspoken questions and half-formed fears. The land stretching wide and unforgiving around them, red earth cracked beneath the hooves of his horse as Nia walked beside him at first, refusing to ride until he insisted with a firmness that left no room for pride to argue. And when she finally climbed up behind him, gripping the saddle, she felt the strange pull of safety mixed with uncertainty, because men like Elias were rare but not impossible, and hope in the West was a dangerous thing to trust. The ranch sat alone against the horizon, weathered but strong, a place built by hands that respected the land even while claiming it. And as they arrived, Elias dismounted, offering water, food, space, not questions, because he understood that survival often required silence before truth. And over the days that followed, Nia learned the rhythms of the ranch, the early mornings, the long shadows at dusk, the way Elias spoke little but listened deeply, and slowly, cautiously, pieces of her story emerged. Her family driven off their land, her father killed by men who never faced justice, her decision to work for scraps in towns that hated her just to stay alive. And Elias listened, anger burning quiet behind his eyes, not the wild rage of revenge, but the steady fire of a man who knew wrong when he saw it. And trouble, as it always did, followed her like a storm cloud, because the three men from Red Hollow did not forget humiliation easily, and pride wounded in public demanded payment. And one night, as the wind howled across the plains, they came riding hard, guns gleaming, intent on reclaiming what they believed Elias had stolen from them. Control, power, dominance. And they shouted his name, daring him to come out, daring him to bleed. And Elias stepped onto the porch alone, rifle in hand, Nia watching from the doorway, heart pounding, not with fear but with a fierce, unfamiliar loyalty. And the confrontation that followed was swift and brutal, words exchanged like bullets, shots fired that cracked the night open. And when the dust settled, two men rode away wounded and broken, their courage left bleeding in the dirt, and the scarred man lay face down, alive but defeated, staring up at the stars as Elias stood over him and made it clear that Red Hollow would never touch the Apache girl again, not while he drew breath. And the message spread fast across the frontier, carried by whispers and wary glances, that Elias Crow was not a man to test, and that the Apache girl under his protection was no longer alone. In the weeks that followed, something deeper grew between them, not romance rushed by danger, but respect forged through shared survival, through long conversations under open skies, through the understanding that both had lost things this land could never return. And when soldiers later came asking questions, looking for excuses to drag Nia away, Elias stood firm again, using his name, his land rights, his reputation as shields, and for the first time in her life, Nia felt what it was like to be defended not as property, not as charity, but as a person worthy of standing beside. And in time, the ranch became more than a refuge, and it became a symbol, a quiet defiance against a world that thrived on cruelty. And their story became one of those told in low voices around campfires, not because it was loud or legendary, but because it was true. And in the Wild West, truth carried a power all its own. And if you've stayed this far, if this story has moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that courage and humanity can exist even in the harshest times, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now to keep these powerful frontier stories alive, because every subscription helps bring more untold stories, like this one, out of the dust and into the light where they belong.